Hello everyone, welcome in our first CSS tutorial, and this tutorial I'm gonna teach you the current version of CSS from scratch with Notepad++ and how to install the Notepad++. CSS3 is the current version of CSS language, and CSS simply means the cascading style sheet. So CSS is a language that we use to style an HTML document. In other language, it describes how HTML elements should be displayed. So it can control the layout of multiple web pages all at once, as we shall see in our advanced tutorials. So the group we call W3C created CSS because using HTML to style the documents was very hectic. So they came up with CSS to summarize the problem. I will be teaching you from basic to advanced, and therefore I recommend that if you are a beginner, then you should follow the order of my playlist without skipping even one, for you to understand the flow of the language. Now, every language has its rule or syntax. If you know the syntax of any language, then you will be able to go. Like for instance, for our CSS, it contains a selector and a declaration block. So a selector is just what identifies the HTML element, or it points to the HTML element you want to style. An HTML element can be in form of a tag name, can be ID, a class, combinator, pseudo classes, and others, as you shall be seeing. And a declaration block contain many property names and property values, which can be separated by a semicolon when there are more than one, and they are surrounded by curly braces. So what I mean, for example, when you look at the last example, last line, P means paragraph in HTML. It's a tag name called P, or paragraph. So P will be our selector, which has been identified. So it means that all P's that will be found in HTML element will be inheriting these property values. And when you see inside the curly braces, you have the text align. Text align is the property name, and its value is center. You can see the syntax. The property name and the property value are separated by a full colon, and we end a statement with a semicolon, as we saw even in HTML. So we separate. For the background color is another property name, and you may notice that two naming in CSS is separated by a hyphen. Background color, so if there are two names, you separate them by a hyphen. And so property name, background color, and red, the values are separated by a full. In the next tutorial, when we shall be dealing with how to insert CSS, the syntax is just similar, but just a slight different for inline, external, and internal. A practical example of what CSS is. For example, on my Notepad+, I have a CSS here, an HTML file with div. Then I have a style or CSS by the selector, the div, which is the selector, and a block of property names, and what we call the CSS query medias. So I'll just show you the results directly, and you'll see how interesting it is. So if I refresh, you will see that square or that div behaving with different color. So I can make it more in such a way that whenever it hits a certain corner, for example here, it should be able to change the shape, the border radius. Let's say to 50%, and let me duplicate this one. So I want to copy and paste. On each iteration after one corner, it should be able to change the shape to circular, for example, say that. So make sure you save, don't open but save. Save is here. So when you refresh, you will see how it is very interesting. So it will change the shape to circular, here circle, then return back to the square. Another example is this template. So you can see these carousels, how they are behaving, that smooth scrolling. This pop-up, that carousel. So I would like to interfere with one of the CSS folder. For example, you may want to rename it, say just S, so that CSS is interfered with. That is to mean that when I refresh, this website will come in form of HTML only. So you'll see how it is very ugly. Everything is just in shaggy form. So that's the power of the CSS. It looks, or it makes the HTML content to be very attractive. So in our next tutorial, we shall do how to insert CSS, or the 3 ways of inserting CSS in HTML. So keep
Panda. I got broads in Atlanta, just to throw me in the family. Credit cards and the scammers, getting no licks in the band.